Various celebrities were quick to give their vacuous opinions on national gun policy in the wake of the Parkland shooting, of course. Famed constitutional law scholar Chelsea Handler tweeted this, quote, "We have to elect candidates that are not funded by the NRA in November. We have an opportunity to elect candidates who won't allow kids to go to school and get shot. It's disgusting how many times this has happened, and Republicans do nothing. You all have blood on your hands," she said in measured tones. Meanwhile, elder statesman Kim Kardashian West tweeted this, quote, "We owe it to our children and our teachers to keep them safe while at school. Prayers won't do this, action will. Congress, please do your job. Protect Americans from senseless gun violence." That was written by a publicist, you can tell. And there are a lot of other tweets in that same vein. Author and columnist Mark Steyn specializes in celebrity tweets. Indeed, he's compiling a book on the subject, we hope, and he joins us tonight. Hey, Mark.
Hey, Tucker. Good to be with you.
So what do you make of the response to this?
Well, you know, at a certain level, I understand these idiotic tweets because the defining act of these school shootings is the absence of meaning. I mean, if you compare it with, say, that ISIS guy on the bike path in New York who mowed down a bunch of people because he wants to usher in a new caliphate worldwide, in a sense, when you're doing it for Allah, that's easier to understand than these completely empty purposeless events where a guy just kills a bunch of school kids for no reason at all. And in that vacuum where we search for meaning, people pour their lamest, dreariest tropes. And so to blame it on the NRA is the default position of most celebrities and most Democrats, and that's what they do. But it's precisely because there is an absence of meaning in this event. It's precisely because a guy kills 17 people for no reason whatsoever. They did nothing to him. That suggests what you said at the top of the show, that the reasons for it are deeper, more complex, and it behooves us, in memory of the dead, to actually talk and think seriously about it.
I agree with that. It's a very deep observation, though, about the hollowness at the core of these things. What do you think, and I don't know, you don't want to speculate, no responsible person does, but you've watched years of this. What's your instinct about some of the causes of it?
Well, for example, I mean, I think it is much... You talked about social atomization at the top of the show, Tucker, and that's true. But the fact is that the combination of factors means you can be socially entirely dysfunctional and actually have a what seems like a rich and rewarding fantasy life through technology now. You know, if you're in the late 19th century, if you were a miserable social loser, you were basically just on your own kicking a can around the backyard. There was nothing else to do. Now, like this guy, you can go on the internet, you can make threats that attract the attention of the FBI, apparently. You can lead a rewarding life, communicating with some guy in Uzbekistan or Papua New Guinea, all over the world. And in some sense, that fantasy life is more real for people than actually, you know, going to the soda fountain and having a chocolate malt with friends or whatever they were doing 50, 60 or years ago. And that's very disturbing. The fact that the void is now rewarding and fulfilling, there is great peril in that, because it suggests we're going to have more of these kind of people in the years ahead.
The effects of technology, we have not paused long enough to consider what they are, but I suspect you're absolutely right. This is one of them. Mark Steyn, thank you for that. Really interesting.
Thanks a lot.
Well, as is now well-established tradition, a mass shooting quickly provokes calls for aggressive new gun control from Democratic politicians.
I believe in the Constitution, but no right is absolute, and common sense measures consistent with the Second Amendment are absolutely acceptable under our laws.
In states and communities that have looser and laxer gun laws, there are more gun crimes committed.
I have said over and over, I'd rather pass gun safety legislation than win the election.
Ethan Behrman is a California radio show host, and he joins us. Ethan, thanks a lot for coming on.
Thanks, Tucker.
So the 1996 Australian example is something that liberals often mention. We said at the top of the show that Dan Pfeiffer, the assistant to President Obama and now a CNN talker, wrote a piece several months ago going around today about how that's a model for this country, the gun buyback, which was mandatory, so gun confiscation. So there are hundreds of millions of firearms in the United States. What do you think would happen if liberal dreams came true and federal agents tried to confiscate hundreds of millions of privately owned weapons in this country?
That's not the right approach. And by the way, I don't actually agree with the Australian example. I use Germany, Finland, and Switzerland as the examples, and even Israel for that matter, which is where they have psychological background exams before you're issued the license to have your firearm. Switzerland has half as many firearms as we do, but they have 0 school shootings. Why is that? And they even have semi-automatic rifles. So the question becomes, what are we doing to make sure people who shouldn't have firearms don't have firearms? And that is where we need to be addressing laws.
I wonder though,
let's be honest, Tucker.
It's interesting. I mean, there are so many, and the Swiss example is a great one. There's a very high percentage of gun ownership there. The government actually encourages people to have weapons at home, as in effect a militia. But you have very few mass shootings, and in fact, very little crime. I'm wondering why there are no calls from the left to ask real questions about American culture, and does the collapse of family structure, millennia-old family structures, maybe something to do with this, or the fact that, you know, a quarter of the population's on psychotropic drugs, or obvious things. Why does no liberal ever mention those? It's always about taking my firearms away. Why is that, I wonder?
Well, I mean, there is something to be to what you're saying, but let's talk about it from a bigger picture then. If you're going to go down that route, there were significant changes that happened in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, not just affecting the family, but also in terms of consumption of drugs that are actually prescribed by doctors for children.
That's what I'm saying.
We have
That's
things
exactly
like social
what I'm talking
media.
about. I agree completely. So, but what's so interesting is look, and I don't know the answer to this. I'm not a social scientist, but I've lived here almost 50 years, and I've seen how the country has changed. Guns are tools. And you can do with them a lot of different things. They don't shoot themselves. It's silly. I mean, honestly, though, and we've had semi-automatic weapons for both of our lifetimes, and they haven't been misused like this. So why is this willful blindness to obvious causes and instead blaming the tool? That makes me suspicious. Can you see why?
Well, I can, but I want to disagree with you on something. Why would you give somebody, let's say, that doesn't know how to hammer a nail, give them an automatic nail gun, and so they're going to accidentally shoot themselves with that? That's the same idea here with 100-round magazines. Bump stocks are absolutely meaningless and useless things that are just done to circumvent automatic weapons laws. Okay, there are common sense things that we can do to minimize the damage, Tucker, minimize it.
It's not look, it's not real. There's one crime ever that I'm aware of ever in the United States in our history that was committed with the bump stock. I don't have any emotional attachment to bump stocks. They're stupid. They destroy your accuracy, whatever.
Right.
But that's so far from the actual point, which is what's going on to our society that would cause a 19-year-old boy to shoot his former classmates. Why does no one ask that question? And all these cable news demagogues, you know, I care more than you do. But nobody asks the real questions. Why? What is this anyway? Talk about avoidance.
Well, I know there are a couple of additions. This is actually a very complicated topic, and one of them is we have to change our laws regarding mental health care and getting people that you and I have talked about before, and it relates to homelessness that you brought up before.
I agree.
Mental health care is a crisis in this country. But then the Republicans want to cut. The Trump budget wants to cut over $1 trillion out of Medicaid and Medicare.
So the Democrats close the mental hospitals. Okay, you can have the partisan debate, but I don't even care about that. I'm a father of 4. I care about the country. I want to have a real. I don't want to be infantilized with this dumb crap about, oh, the fact that you have a deer rifle makes me less safe. That's a lie, and everyone knows it. Why are young men doing this? Maybe it's, I don't know why, but again, why do we not have that conversation? Why are we pretending it's not real?
But because there's a two-part conversation, and you and I, interestingly enough, agree on the mental health problem that we're having. But on the second side, until we resolve that, why make it easy for them to mow down 17 lives in moments?
Because actually, I know a lot about this. I don't think that you do. The truth is, you're not allowed.
I do. I've fired AR-15s before, Tucker.
No, but the law around it. If you're adjudicated mentally ill, you cannot buy a gun. No one who has been adjudicated mentally ill, to my knowledge, in a mass shooting has been able to buy a gun. The system, as it stands, works. What do you?
So
do you see what I'm saying?
No,
so, like,
it doesn't.
If
so
a
the
kid
teachers knew there was a problem with this kid, and no, our mental health laws are broken. They knew there was something wrong. Teachers know who are the problem, and we're not empowering them to do something about it.
So it's really simple. Then let's be very specific in a very short amount of time. A teacher notices a kid is weird, possibly menacing. Does that mean
get him counseling?
I'm not against that, but does that mean he loses his right to buy a gun as an adult? I mean, what's the answer?
And we do need to change. Yes.
If a teacher thinks you're weird, he can take away a constitutional right. I'm not arguing against it.
Once the psychologist or psychiatrist has seen you, yes.
So
Once
if you're
the psychologist or psychiatrist has seen
that's already the law, Ethan. That's what I don't understand. That's already the law. You should know that, right?
So we need to bridge the gap. We need to bridge the gap, Tucker. And in the meantime,
what does that mean?
I've actually called for Governor Brown here in California to call up the National Guard, station 2 National Guards people at every single school until we are able to resolve this.
Okay, that's just putting a Band-Aid on a bloody wound. But thank you, Ethan. I appreciate it, and I hope we can talk.